You always said I was cold. Now it's time for you to chill out forever." My daughter-in-law Cassandra's voice echoed through the industrial freezer as she slammed the heavy steel door. The metallic clang reverberated through my bones as darkness swallowed me whole. Her plan was simple: steal my $99 million fortune while I froze to death in her catering warehouse. But when she returned hours later to discover my body, I was sitting in her living room with a very big surprise. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. How did a 69-year-old grandmother end up locked in a commercial freezer by her own family? Well, let me backtrack and tell you exactly how I got here. My name is Dorothy Whitman, though everyone calls me Dot, and 6 months ago, I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. My son Michael had just moved in with his new wife Cassandra to take care of me after my husband Harold passed. At least that's what I believed. The truth started revealing itself 3 months ago, when I overheard Cassandra on the phone in my study. $99 million, she whispered urgently. The old bat has $99 million just sitting there. Insurance money, Harold's business, investments. She's too senile to manage it properly. I froze in the hallway, my afternoon tea growing cold in my hands. Trust me, Marcus. Once she's gone, Michael inherits everything, and what Michael inherits, I control. That night at dinner, Cassandra smiled sweetly as she served my favorite pot roast. "Dot, you seem tired lately. Maybe we should look into getting you some help. Professional care." Michael nodded enthusiastically. "Mom, Cass is right. You've been forgetting things." Forgetting things? I'd built a multi-million-dollar portfolio alongside Harold, managed our household for 47 years, and still balanced my checkbook to the penny. But apparently, I was forgetting things. The next week, Cassandra began her campaign in earnest. She hid my reading glasses, then acted concerned when I couldn't find them. She moved my medications to different cabinets, then worried aloud about my confusion. She even unplugged my bedroom clock and expressed alarm when I slept past my usual wake-up time. Each incident was small, innocent even. But together, they painted a picture of a woman losing her grip on reality. Michael, bless his trusting heart, fell for every manipulation. "Mom, maybe it's time to consider assisted living," he suggested one evening. "Just temporarily, until you feel more yourself." Assisted living. I'd seen this playbook before with Harold's mother. First comes temporary care, then power of attorney, then a mysterious decline in health. I wasn't about to become another cautionary tale, but I made a critical mistake. I let Cassandra know I was on to her. It happened on a Wednesday morning in early December. I was reviewing my investment statements when Cassandra walked into the study uninvited. "Dot, you know you don't need to worry about all those complicated financial papers anymore. Michael and I can handle everything." She reached for the documents with perfectly manicured nails that had never known a day of honest work. "I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs, thank you," I said firmly, pulling the papers away. "These accounts are in my name only." Her mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something calculating flash across her face. "Of course, Dot. I just thought it might be overwhelming for someone your age." Someone my age. I'd been hearing that phrase a lot lately. At the grocery store when I took an extra minute to choose the ripest tomatoes. At the bank when I carefully counted my cash before making a deposit. At the doctor's office when I asked questions about my medications. Suddenly, being thorough had become evidence of decline. "Cassandra," I said, setting down my reading glasses and meeting her gaze directly. "I know exactly what you're doing." The pretense vanished from her face like makeup washed away. "I don't know what you mean, Dot." But her voice had changed, losing its syrupy sweetness. "You're trying to convince Michael I'm incompetent so you can gain control of my finances. I heard your phone call about the $99 million. Cassandra went very still. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You heard wrong." But we both knew she was lying. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as we stared at each other across the mahogany desk that had belonged to Harold's father. "Pack your bags, Cassandra, both of you. I want you out of my house by tomorrow." I stood up, trying to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. "I'll be calling my lawyer first thing in the morning to ensure my will is ironclad." That's when her mask came off completely. "You foolish old woman, do you really think anyone will believe you over us? Michael thinks you're losing your mind. The neighbors think you're losing your mind. Even Dr. Peterson is concerned about your recent behavior. Recent behavior. I realized with growing horror how expertly she'd isolated me. The social invitations I'd allegedly declined, but never received. The family gatherings where I was supposedly too confused to attend. The medical appointments where she'd accompanied me and spoke for me, describing symptoms I'd never experienced. Michael will never choose you over me, I said, but doubt crept into my voice. Won't he? Cassandra smiled, and it was like watching a snake prepare to strike. He already has, Dot. Every time he agreed you needed help. Every time he nodded when I expressed concern about your memory. Every time he failed to defend you when I mentioned your increasing confusion. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. Face it, Dot. You're already dead to him. You're just taking up space until we make it official. The words hit me like physical blows, but I refused to let her see me break. Get out of my house. My voice was steady, thank God. Oh, we will, she said, heading for the door. But not the way you think. That evening, Michael approached me with the expression of someone delivering bad news. Mom, Cassandra told me about your conversation today. His voice was gentle but firm. The tone you'd use with a confused child. She's worried about you. We both are. Michael, your wife is trying to steal my money. The words sounded desperate even to my own ears. She admitted it. She's been manipulating you, making you think I'm incompetent. My son's face crumpled with what looked like genuine pain. Mom, please. You're scaring me. These paranoid thoughts, the accusations. This isn't like you. Paranoid thoughts. How efficiently Cassandra had poisoned the well. Michael, I raised you. I know when someone is lying to your face. But even as I spoke, I could see the doubt in his eyes. She'd done her work too well. Cass thinks maybe we should have Dr. Peterson evaluate you, he said quietly, just to rule out any medical issues. Medical issues. Another step in the playbook. Next would come a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's, carefully orchestrated with a doctor who was either fooled or bought. Then conservatorship. Then death by natural causes. I'd seen it happen to Harold's wealthy Aunt Margaret. The pattern was always the same. I'm fine, Michael, but if it would make you feel better, I'll see Dr. Peterson next week. I needed time to think, to plan. Thank you, Mom. I know this is hard, but we love you. We just want what's best. The worst part was, I believed he meant it. Michael truly thought he was protecting me from myself. That night, I lay in bed listening to them talk in the room next door. Their voices were muffled, but I caught fragments. Has to be done carefully. Can't look suspicious. Inheritance laws are clear. No other way. I pulled my pillow over my head, but the words followed me into my dreams. The next morning, Cassandra was unusually cheerful. Dot, I thought we could spend the day together. Just the two of us. I want to show you my catering warehouse. I'm so proud of what I've built. I should have been suspicious, but honestly, I was exhausted from the emotional warfare. A day away from the house sounded appealing. Her warehouse was impressive, I had to admit. I supply events all over the county, she explained, leading me through the commercial kitchen. Weddings, corporate functions, charity galas. It's taken 3 years to build this business. She seemed genuinely proud, and for a moment, I wondered if I'd misjudged her. Maybe the phone call I'd overheard was taken out of context. Maybe my grief over Harold was making me paranoid. The freezer is my pride and joy, she continued, approaching a massive steel door. Restaurant grade, keeps everything at perfect temperature. She pulled the heavy door open, revealing a room-sized freezer lined with shelves. Want to see inside? It's quite impressive. I stepped forward to look, and that's when she struck. The push wasn't violent, just firm enough to send me stumbling into the freezer. I spun around as the door began to close. Cassandra! But she was already speaking, her voice calm and matter-of-fact. You always said I was cold, Dot. Now it's time for you to chill out forever. The lock clicked with a finality that made my blood freeze faster than the sub-zero air. I pounded on the steel door, shouting until my throat was raw, but the warehouse was soundproofed and isolated. No one would hear me. No one even knew where I was. The cold hit me immediately, seeping through my wool coat and straight into my bones. The freezer was massive, maybe 12 feet by 8 feet, with metal shelving units filled with frozen food containers. The temperature gauge read -10 degrees Fahrenheit. I had maybe 30 minutes before hypothermia became a real threat. But 30 minutes was longer than Cassandra expected me to last. She'd made one crucial mistake. She'd locked me in with her emergency supplies. Restaurant-grade freezers were required to have safety equipment, and there it was on the wall. An emergency blanket, a flashlight, and most importantly, an interior release handle that she'd apparently forgotten about. I wrapped myself in the emergency blanket and forced myself to think clearly. Cassandra would return in a few hours to discover my body. She'd call 911, crying about how poor, confused Dot had wandered into the freezer and accidentally locked herself in. Michael would be devastated but not surprised. After all, everyone knew I'd been having problems lately. The emergency release handle worked exactly as designed. I turned it slowly, hearing the lock mechanism disengage, but I didn't open the door. Not yet. Instead, I cracked it just enough to let in some warmer air and began to plan. If Cassandra thought I was dead, she'd drop her guard. And that's when I'd learn exactly how deep this conspiracy went. I spent the next hour searching through her freezer inventory. What I found made my blood boil despite the cold. Hidden behind boxes of frozen vegetables were documents in waterproof containers. Copies of forged medical records showing progressive dementia. A power of attorney document with my signature expertly forged. Most damning of all, a detailed timeline of my planned decline leading to my inevitable death from natural causes. But the most shocking discovery was a life insurance policy I'd never seen before. $5 million with Michael as the beneficiary, the paperwork dated just 2 months ago. The signature was a perfect forgery of my handwriting. Cassandra hadn't just planned to steal my existing fortune. She'd insured me like livestock. The warehouse door opened around 3 p.m. I heard Cassandra's footsteps, deliberately slow and hesitant, as if she was approaching something she dreaded finding. "Dot?" she called out, her voice perfectly pitched with concern. "Dot, are you in here? I've been looking everywhere for you." I listened from my hiding spot behind the kitchen prep counter as she made her way to the freezer. The performance was Oscar-worthy. Gasps of horror, frantic calls to 911, sobbing explanations about her confused mother-in-law who'd wandered off. She must have gotten lost and accidentally locked herself in. Oh God, this is all my fault. I should have been watching her more carefully. The paramedics arrived within minutes. I heard them discussing the scene, taking Cassandra's statement, calling for the coroner. "Poor woman," one of them said. "These dementia cases are always tragic. Family never wants to believe how far gone they really are." After everyone left, I waited another hour before emerging from my hiding place. The warehouse was dark and quiet. Perfect. I made my way to Cassandra's office and began photographing everything with my phone. The forged documents, the insurance policy, even her computer files which she'd carelessly left open. But the best evidence was still to come. Hidden in her desk drawer was a handwritten journal detailing every step of her plan. How she'd researched Harold's death to perfect her technique. How she'd studied other inheritance scams. How she'd practiced forging my signature. Most chilling of all, how she'd calculated that my death would net them over $100 million once the insurance payout was included. By 6 p.m., I was sitting in Cassandra's living room with all the evidence spread across her coffee table. The front door key was exactly where I thought it would be, under the fake rock by the roses, because some people never change their patterns. I'd made myself comfortable, poured a glass of her expensive wine, and settled in to wait. The look on her face when she walked through that door was worth every minute I'd spent in that freezer. Cassandra's scream could have shattered crystal. She dropped her purse and car keys, stumbling backward into the doorframe as if she'd seen an actual ghost, which, from her perspective, she had. "Hello, dear," I said calmly, taking a sip of her wine. "I hope you don't mind that I let myself in. We need to talk." Her face cycled through shock, terror, and finally anger with remarkable speed. How did you... She couldn't seem to form complete sentences. "How did I escape your little freezer trap? Or how did I discover your adorable journal?" I held up the leather-bound book where she'd documented my planned murder. "Really? Cassandra, keeping written records of felonies, is rather amateur." She tried to regain her composure, straightening her shoulders and lifting her chin. "I don't know what you think you found, but nothing. I opened the journal to a random page and began reading aloud. Day 43. Dot is becoming suspicious. Need to accelerate timeline. Michael, completely convinced of her decline. Dr. Peterson scheduled for next week to provide dementia diagnosis as discussed. The color drained from her face. You broke into my private property. That's illegal. I laughed, surprising myself with how genuine it sounded. Oh, sweetheart. We passed illegal about the time you locked me in a freezer to die. Everything else is just bookkeeping. She glanced around the room as if looking for escape routes or weapons. Smart girl. Where's Michael? I asked conversationally. I assume he's planning my funeral arrangements. Poor boy must be devastated by his mother's tragic accident. Her jaw tightened. Michael doesn't know anything about this. This being your plan to murder me for my inheritance? No, I don't imagine he does. Michael may be gullible, but he's not a killer. I set down my wine glass and leaned forward. But you are, aren't you, Cassandra? This isn't your first time, is it? Her eyes went wide. I don't know what you're talking about. But her voice betrayed her. Let me guess. A previous husband or boyfriend who died under mysterious circumstances? An elderly relative who left you money? Someone else who was foolish enough to trust you? She moved toward the kitchen, and I knew she was going for either a weapon or her phone. I wouldn't, I warned. Not unless you want me to send these photos to the police right now. I held up my phone, showing her the screen full of evidence I'd documented. Every forged signature, every fraudulent document, every word of your precious journal. All date-stamped and backed up to cloud storage. Cassandra froze halfway to the kitchen. What do you want? The question confirmed everything I needed to know. If she'd been innocent, she would have demanded I leave or threatened to call the police. Instead, she was ready to negotiate. What I want is simple. I want you to pack your bags and disappear. Tonight. Forever. You can't be serious. Oh, but I am. You have two choices, dear. You can leave voluntarily and never contact Michael or me again, or you can wait for the police to arrest you for attempted murder, fraud, forgery, and insurance fraud. I'm told federal prison is particularly unpleasant for pretty young women. She tried a different approach, tears welling in her eyes. Dot, please. I know how this looks, but I love Michael. I would never hurt him. You don't love Michael. You love what Michael represents, access to my money. But here's what you failed to understand about my son. He may be trusting, but he has a moral compass. When he learns what you tried to do to his mother, he'll be the one calling the police. The tears vanished as quickly as they'd appeared. Michael will never believe you. Everyone thinks you're losing your mind. I made sure of that. Yes, you did excellent work there. Very thorough. But you made one fatal mistake. I stood up, gathering the evidence from the coffee table. You documented everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every step of your plan. Even a public defender could get a conviction with this evidence. The front door opened, and we both turned to see Michael walking in. His face was puffy from crying, his hair disheveled. He looked like a man who'd lost everything that mattered to him. Cass, he called out. I got your message about Mom? His voice trailed off as he saw me standing in his living room, very much alive. Hello, sweetheart, I said gently. I'm sorry you had to go through that scare today. Michael's legs seemed to give out. He grabbed the doorframe for support, staring at me as if I might disappear. But Cassandra called me. She said you were dead, that you'd gotten confused and locked yourself in her freezer. I did get locked in her freezer, I confirmed. But not because I was confused. I held up Cassandra's journal. Your wife tried to murder me, Michael, and this documents the entire plan. His face went through the same cycle Cassandra's had. Shock, confusion, disbelief. That's impossible. Mom, you must have misunderstood. Read it yourself. I handed him the journal, watching his expression change as he absorbed his wife's carefully documented plan to kill me and steal our family's fortune. When he reached the page about the forged insurance policy, his hands began to shake. Cass? His voice was barely a whisper. Tell me this isn't real. Cassandra had been calculating her next move while he read. Now she tried one last manipulation. Michael, honey, your mother has been paranoid and confused for months. She broke into our house. She's making wild accusations. Maybe she wrote that journal herself during one of her episodes. For a moment, I thought she might succeed. Michael wanted so desperately to believe the best of everyone. But then he reached the page where she'd written about their insurance discussion. "You asked me about Mom's life insurance 3 weeks ago," he said slowly. "You said it was for estate planning, but according to this, you already knew about a policy that Mom never mentioned." "Michael," she started, but he was flipping through more pages. "You documented conversations we never had. Meetings with doctors I've never heard of. Cassandra, some of these entries are from before we even moved in with Mom." The truth was dawning on him with painful clarity. "How long have you been planning this?" She made one final attempt at deflection. "Your mother is manipulating you. She's jealous of our marriage, of our happiness. She can't stand that you love someone more than her." But Michael was reading a page about how easy it would be to convince her spineless husband that his mother needed to die. "Spineless husband?" His voice was deadly quiet. "That's what you really think of me?" Cassandra's composure finally cracked completely. "You are spineless. You let your mother control every aspect of your life. You've never stood up to her once. You're 40 years old and still run to Mommy for everything." The insults poured out like poison from a broken bottle. Every cruel thought she'd hidden behind her sweet smile, every manipulation she'd used to control him. Michael listened with growing horror as his wife revealed who she really was beneath the mask. "And yes, I planned to kill the old bat. Someone had to. She was never going to die naturally, and that money was being wasted on someone too senile to appreciate it." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael set the journal down carefully and walked to the phone. "What are you doing?" Cassandra demanded. "Calling the police." His voice was steady now, resolute. "Mom, do you have evidence besides the journal?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd taken. Forged documents, fraudulent insurance policies, medical records that were fabricated. Everything's documented. As Michael dialed 911, Cassandra made a run for the door. But she'd forgotten one crucial thing. I might be 69, but I'd raised a son as a single mother after his father left. I knew how to handle myself in a crisis. The wine bottle made a satisfying thud when it connected with her ankle. She went down hard, and by the time she'd recovered, Michael was blocking the exit. "Don't make this worse than it already is, Cass." The police arrived within minutes. As they cuffed Cassandra and read her rights, she spat one final insult at me. "You should have just died quietly like you were supposed to." But I was done being quiet. I was done being manipulated. And I was definitely done being underestimated. As they loaded her into the patrol car, I realized something wonderful had happened in that freezer. The old, trusting Dorothy Whitman had died in there. The woman who'd emerged was someone new, someone stronger, someone who would never again let anyone make her feel small or insignificant. That night, as Michael and I sat in my kitchen drinking tea and processing what had happened, he asked the question I'd been dreading. "Mom, how could I have been so blind? How did I not see what she was doing to you?" I reached across the table and took his hand. "Because you loved her, sweetheart. And love makes us want to believe the best in people. But sometimes, I thought to myself, the best thing love can do is open our eyes to the truth, even when that truth is cold enough to freeze your heart." 3 weeks after Cassandra's arrest, I was sitting in Detective Richardson's office, learning just how deep the rabbit hole went. "Mrs. Whitman, your daughter-in-law's real name isn't Cassandra Mills," he said, sliding a file across his desk. "It's Jennifer Cash, and she has quite a history." I opened the file to photos of a woman who looked exactly like Cassandra, but with different hair, different clothes, different names. Jennifer Cash married Robert Turner in Phoenix 2019. He died 6 months later in a hiking accident. Left her everything. Detective Richardson pointed to another photo. Then she became Caroline Miller in Denver, married to Frank Wilson. Heart attack in his sleep. Age 52. No previous cardiac issues. The pattern was sickeningly familiar. "How many?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. 7 that we've confirmed. She's been doing this for over a decade, moving from state to state, changing identities. You're the first victim who survived to tell about it. 7 men. 7 families destroyed. 7 fortunes stolen. The FBI wants to interview you, Richardson continued. This case could help them close multiple suspicious deaths across the country. I thought about those other families, other children who'd lost parents to this monster. Of course. Whatever you need. Michael was struggling with the revelation that his wife of 2 years was essentially a professional black widow. How could I not have seen it? He asked for the 100th time as we sat in my garden. Mom, I brought a serial killer into our home. You brought home someone you loved, I corrected gently. The fact that she fooled you doesn't make you weak, sweetheart. It makes you human. But privately, I was reviewing every interaction I'd had with Cassandra, looking for signs I'd missed. The charm offensive had been perfect, I had to admit. The media attention was overwhelming. Black Widow's plot foiled by quick-thinking grandmother, read one headline. Senior citizen outsmarts serial killer, proclaimed another. Reporters camped outside my house for days until I finally agreed to one television interview just to make them go away. What advice would you give to other seniors who might be targeted by someone like Jennifer Cash? The interviewer asked. I considered the question carefully. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And never, ever be ashamed to ask for help. But the real challenge wasn't dealing with reporters. It was dealing with the financial aftermath of Cassandra's schemes. She'd managed to open 3 credit cards in my name, forged checks totaling nearly $50,000, and somehow accessed one of my smaller investment accounts. It'll take months to sort out, my attorney explained. Banking fraud cases are notoriously complex. At least Michael was helping now instead of enabling my would-be killer. He'd thrown himself into untangling the financial mess with an energy that bordered on obsessive. I need to fix this, he insisted. I need to make up for what I let happen. We were becoming a team in a way we'd never been before. The FBI interview was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in February. Agent Patricia Vance was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who looked like she'd seen everything and been surprised by none of it. Mrs. Whitman, I need you to walk me through every interaction you had with the suspect, no matter how trivial it might seem. For 3 hours, I recounted every conversation, counted every gesture, every moment that had felt off. Agent Vance took notes constantly, occasionally asking for clarification. She asked about your medications very early in the relationship, she observed. That's consistent with her previous patterns. She researches her victims' health conditions to plan appropriate causes of death. The thought that Cassandra had been studying me like a lab rat from day one was nauseating. How did she choose her victims? I asked. Online obituaries, mostly. She'd target recently widowed men with significant assets and adult children who lived far away, men who were lonely and vulnerable. But she chose Michael, I pointed out. Not Harold. Agent Vance nodded grimly. Her methods were evolving. Marrying the son instead of the target allowed her to manipulate from inside the family structure. Plus, your fortune was significantly larger than her previous scores. Significantly larger. It still felt surreal that my careful lifetime of saving and investing had made me a target for murder. The insurance policy she forged, I asked. Would it have been valid? Absolutely. She'd become very sophisticated in her document fraud. If you had died, Michael would have received that $5 million payout, and as his wife, she'd have had access to it. After the interview, I drove to the cemetery where Harold was buried. I sat by his headstone and told him everything that had happened. I wish you were here to see this, I said aloud, feeling only slightly foolish. You always said I was tougher than I looked. A cold February wind stirred the bare branches above me, and for a moment I could almost hear his voice. Damn right you are, Dot. The financial recovery was progressing slowly but steadily. My bank had been remarkably cooperative once they understood the scope of the fraud. We're implementing new security measures, the branch manager assured me. This kind of systematic identity theft has become increasingly sophisticated. Michael had insisted on moving back home temporarily to help me reorganize my affairs. I don't want you dealing with this alone, he said. It was nice having him around, though I could see the guilt eating at him. He'd grown thinner, more serious. The boy who'd always seen the best in everyone had learned that sometimes people's worst impulses win. You know this isn't your fault, I told him one evening as we reviewed credit card statements. Cass was a professional, Michael. This is what she did for a living. He looked up from the papers, his eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion. I should have listened to you. When you tried to warn me, I chose her over you. You chose love over suspicion, I corrected. In most circumstances, that would be the right choice. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came unexpected news. Agent Vance called on a Thursday morning with information that changed everything. "Mrs. Whitman, we've been analyzing Jennifer Cash's financial records, and we found something interesting. She has a storage unit in Denver with contents that might belong to her previous victims." The storage unit was like a trophy room for a serial killer. Photo albums from weddings that had ended in murder, jewelry taken from dead men's homes, documents from forged wills and insurance policies. And in the back, behind boxes of stolen mementos, was a safe containing over $2 million in cash and gold coins. "This represents the liquid assets she accumulated from 7 murders," Agent Vance explained. "Under federal asset forfeiture laws, this money will be distributed to the victims' families." I thought about those families, children and grandchildren who'd lost inheritances to Cassandra's greed. At least they'd get something back. But the most shocking discovery was a detailed notebook outlining her next targets. She had plans for at least 5 more victims, Agent Vance revealed, including a retired professor in Maine and a widowed business owner in California. You stopping her likely saved multiple lives. The trial was scheduled for September. Jennifer Cash, aka Cassandra Mills, had been charged with 7 counts of murder in the first degree, multiple counts of fraud, and attempted murder. Her public defender was pushing for an insanity plea, but the prosecution had her journal documenting years of careful planning. "She's going to claim she was mentally ill," the prosecutor explained during our preparation meeting. "But your testimony about her calculated behavior will help prove premeditation." I was ready to testify. More than ready. I wanted every detail of her manipulations exposed in open court. Michael had started seeing a therapist to deal with what he called his broken trust radar. "I need to understand how I let this happen," he explained. "Not just for me, but in case I ever want to have another relationship." The fact that he was taking responsibility for his own healing gave me hope. Meanwhile, I was discovering that surviving attempted murder had given me a new perspective on life. Little annoyances that used to bother me seemed trivial now. Rude cashiers, long lines, even the persistent reporters who still occasionally called for follow-up interviews, none of it mattered anymore. "You seem different," my neighbor Mrs. Patterson observed as we worked in our adjoining gardens. "More peaceful somehow." She was right. Having looked death in the face and won, I felt oddly liberated. "I suppose I've learned not to waste energy on things I can't control," I replied. The one thing I could control was how I used the second chance I'd been given. I'd started volunteering with elder advocacy groups, sharing my story to help other seniors recognize the warning signs of financial abuse. "Trust your instincts," I'd tell them. "If someone seems too good to be true, they probably are." The trial began on a crisp September morning. Jennifer Cash looked smaller in her orange jumpsuit, her carefully maintained appearance replaced by the harsh reality of county jail. She avoided eye contact as I took the witness stand, but I could feel her presence like a cold draft. "Mrs. Whitman," the prosecutor began, "please tell the jury about the defendant's behavior in the months before she attempted to kill you." For 2 hours, I recounted every manipulation, every lie, every calculated move she'd made to isolate me and convince my son I was losing my mind. The defense attorney tried to make me seem confused during cross-examination. "Mrs. Whitman, you're 69 years old. Isn't it possible you misinterpreted some of these interactions?" His condescending tone reminded me why I disliked lawyers for most of my adult life. "Young man," I said firmly, "I may be 69, but I built a multi-million-dollar investment portfolio, raised a son as a single mother, and survived being locked in a freezer by a serial killer. My mind is quite sharp, thank you." Several jurors smiled at that. The most powerful moment came when they played the recording from Cassandra's warehouse security system. Her voice, cold and calculating as she called 911 to report my accidental death, filled the courtroom. She must have gotten confused and locked herself in. Oh God, this is all my fault. Michael testified the next day about how she'd manipulated him into believing I was incompetent. His voice broke when he described finding her journal, reading her true thoughts about him and his spineless character. The jury watched him with obvious sympathy, but the prosecution's strongest evidence was Cassandra's own words. Her journal entries, read aloud in her own handwriting, revealed a cold-blooded killer who saw murder as simply a business transaction. Target elderly, isolated, wealthy, gain trust through family connection, establish pattern of decline, execute when opportune. The defense's insanity plea fell apart when the prosecutor presented evidence of her careful research and planning. Ladies and gentlemen, this defendant spent months studying probate law, practicing forgery, and researching hypothermia death rates. This is not the behavior of someone who's mentally ill. This is the behavior of someone who's evil. Jennifer Cash was convicted on all counts. As the jury foreman read the verdict, she finally looked at me. For just a moment, her mask slipped completely, and I saw pure hatred in her eyes. Good. I wanted her to know that she'd failed, that the foolish old woman she'd tried to kill was the reason she'd spend the rest of her life in prison. The judge sentenced her to 7 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. "Mrs. Cash," he said, "you are a predator who has destroyed families and taken lives for nothing more than financial gain. Society needs protection from people like you." As they led her away in shackles, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity, not for what she'd face in prison, but for what she'd become. Somewhere along the way, she'd chosen to see other human beings as nothing more than sources of income. That was its own kind of death. 1 year after the trial, I was cleaning out Harold's office when I found a letter he'd hidden in his desk drawer. My name was written on the envelope in his careful handwriting, along with instructions. For Dot to read only if something terrible happens to her. Inside was a confession that changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. "My dearest Dot," it began, "if you're reading this, then someone has tried to hurt you, and you need to know the truth about our finances." Harold had apparently suspected that his successful investment strategies might eventually make me a target. The letter revealed that our net worth was actually much higher than I'd known. Harold had been secretly moving money into hidden accounts and trusts, protecting our assets in ways I'd never understood. "The 99 million Cassandra knew about is just the tip of the iceberg," he'd written. "I've left detailed instructions with our attorney for accessing the real accounts, but only if you're ever in genuine danger." According to Harold's carefully documented records, our actual net worth was closer to $250 million. He'd been quietly investing and protecting our money for decades, creating a financial fortress that would survive any attempt at theft or manipulation. "I never told you because I wanted you to live without fear," the letter continued. "But if someone has tried to take our life's work, then you need every weapon I can give you." The final revelation was the most shocking of all. Harold had suspected that someone might eventually try to harm me for our money, so he'd set up a foundation in my name that would be activated only upon my death. If Cassandra had succeeded in killing me, she would have discovered that 90% of our fortune was already pledged to charity, leaving only enough for Michael to live comfortably. "She would have murdered you for pocket change," my attorney explained when we reviewed the documents. "Your husband essentially booby-trapped your inheritance against gold diggers." I had to laugh at the elegant justice of it all. Even from beyond the grave, Harold was still protecting me. I decided to activate the foundation while I was alive to see it work. The Harold and Dorothy Whitman Foundation for Elder Safety would fund programs to protect seniors from financial abuse. Our first grant went to a legal aid organization that provided free representation to elderly victims of fraud. Michael had found love again, this time with a kindergarten teacher named Sarah, who thought our family's survival story was inspiring rather than profitable. They'd had a quiet courthouse wedding the previous month, and I'd never seen my son happier. "I'm not making the same mistakes twice," he'd told me. "Sarah and I dated for 2 years, and I made sure she loved me before she ever knew about our family's money." As I sat in my garden on a warm October afternoon, I reflected on how much had changed since that day in Cassandra's freezer. I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, that intuition was more valuable than politeness, and that sometimes the people who try to destroy us end up revealing our own power. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Agent Vance with news that Jennifer Cash had been linked to 3 additional murders in states where she'd lived before her identity change spree. "Your survival and testimony helped us build cases that will bring justice for 11 families," she said. "You should be proud of that." Proud. Yes, I was proud. proud that I'd trusted my instincts, proud that I'd fought back, proud that I'd survived. But mostly, I was proud that I'd learned to value my own life enough to protect it fiercely. That evening, as I watched the sunset from my back porch, I raised a glass of Harold's favorite wine in a toast to second chances, to resilience, and to the powerful lesson that no one gets to decide you're disposable except you. The future stretched ahead of me, bright with possibilities I'd almost lost to a woman who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with a pulse. But Dorothy Whitman wasn't going anywhere, and God help anyone who tried to make me disappear again. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. Cook for my entire family tomorrow. Start at 3 a.m., my daughter-in-law Kristen ordered, not looking up from her phone. Make sure everything is perfect this time. I agreed, then flew to Hawaii without warning. 40 hungry relatives found an empty kitchen along with the surprise gift I left just for her. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. But let me back up and tell you how I ended up plotting the most satisfying revenge of my 64 years on this earth. It was Friday evening when Kristen cornered me in what used to be my own kitchen. Yes, you heard that right. 4 years ago, after my husband Frank died, I made the mistake of selling my beautiful 3-bedroom house and moving in with my son, Robert, and his wife. They convinced me it would be better for everyone. I could help with the kids, contribute to expenses, and we'd be one big happy family. What a joke that turned out to be. Margaret, Kristen said, using my full name like I was a misbehaving child. The family reunion is tomorrow. 43 people are coming, and I need everything ready by noon. She finally looked up, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her phone case. That means you start cooking at 3 in the morning. No excuses this time. The words hit me like a slap. No excuses this time. As if I'd somehow failed her before, when I'd been cooking and cleaning and babysitting and basically running her household for 4 years while she played social media influencer. Kristen, I said carefully, I'm 64 years old. Starting at 3 a.m. seems a bit what? Her voice turned sharp. Too much work for someone who doesn't pay rent? Someone who eats our food and uses our electricity? She stepped closer, and I could smell her expensive perfume. Face it, Margaret. This is the least you can do to earn your keep. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. Not anger. I'd moved past anger months ago. This was something else entirely. This was clarity. Of course, I said sweetly. I'll start at 3 a.m. sharp. She smiled then, that fake smile she wore like makeup. Good. And Margaret? Don't mess up the timing like you did at Easter. People actually matter at this one. After she click-clacked away in her designer heels, I stood in that kitchen, my kitchen, bought with my money, and smiled for the first time in weeks, because Kristen had just made a fatal error. She'd pushed the wrong woman too far. I pulled out my phone and opened the travel app. Hawaii looked lovely this time of year, and their next flight to Honolulu left at 6 a.m. Saturday morning. Perfect timing, really. You might think I'm crazy for making such a dramatic decision, but let me paint you the full picture of my life since moving in with Robert and Kristen. When Frank died, I was drowning in grief and medical bills. The cancer treatment had drained our savings, and the house felt impossibly empty without him. When Robert suggested I sell and move in with them, it seemed like a lifeline. "Mom, we need you," he'd said, holding my hands across the kitchen table. "The kids need their grandmother close, and honestly, we could use help with the mortgage." So I sold my house, the house Frank and I had bought as newlyweds, where we'd raised Robert, where every room held 35 years of memories. I gave them $200,000 from the sale to pay off their mortgage completely. I thought I was investing in family. What I actually bought was 4 years of servitude. It started small. Could I pick up the kids from school since I wasn't working? Could I cook dinner since I was home anyway? Could I help with laundry since the kids were so busy with activities? Before I knew it, I'd become their live-in housekeeper, chef, and babysitter. While Kristen spent her days at the spa or shopping with friends, I was scrubbing toilets and ironing Robert's shirts. When they went on vacations, funded by money I'd helped them save, I stayed home to watch the house. The worst part wasn't the work. It was the complete lack of respect. Like when Kristen redecorated the guest room, my room, without asking, throwing away the photos of Frank I'd carefully arranged. "It looked so cluttered," she'd said with a shrug. Or when she started introducing me to her friends as Robert's mother, she helps out around the house, as if I were hired help instead of family. Or last month, when I overheard her on the phone with her sister. "I don't know how much longer I can deal with her. She's just so old-fashioned. Everything's a production. I can't wait until we can afford to put her in one of those nice senior communities." Standing in my bedroom that Friday night, I methodically packed a suitcase. Not everything. I didn't want to tip them off. Just enough for a week in paradise. As I folded my favorite sundress, the one Kristen had criticized as too bright for someone your age, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Freedom. I booked a suite at the Grand Wiley Resort. Ocean view, spa services included. The cost would have horrified the old Margaret, the one who clipped coupons and worried about every penny. But that Margaret was about to disappear forever. At 2:30 a.m. I tiptoed downstairs and left my masterpiece on the kitchen counter. Not a grocery list or cooking instructions, something much more interesting. Then I called a taxi and slipped out into the pre-dawn darkness. By the time Kristen woke up expecting to smell bacon frying, I was already 30,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean, sipping champagne and watching the sunrise. The look on her face when she discovered what I'd left behind would be worth every penny. The taxi driver was chatty despite the early hour. "Airport," he confirmed, as I settled into the back seat with my single suitcase. "Yes, please. And there's an extra 20 if you can get me there quickly." He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Running away from home, are we?" "Something like that," I smiled, watching my son's house disappear into the darkness. The house I'd helped them keep, where I'd spent 4 years shrinking myself smaller and smaller to fit into their idea of a grateful mother. At the airport, I felt like a different person. Maybe it was the early morning energy, or maybe it was the delicious secret burning in my chest, but I practically floated through security. The TSA agent looked at my ID twice. "Hawaii? Business or pleasure, ma'am?" "Pure pleasure," I said, and meant it. And the flight was only half full, which meant I could spread out and really savor what was happening. As we climbed above the clouds, I imagined Kristen's morning routine. She'd stumble downstairs around 8, expecting to find me elbow-deep in preparation for her precious family reunion. Instead, she'd find my letter. Oh, that letter. I'd spent 3 hours crafting it the night before, making sure every word was perfect. Not cruel, I'm not a cruel person, but honest in a way I'd never been allowed to be. I'd started simply, "Dear Kristen, I won't be cooking for your family reunion today. In fact, I won't be cooking anything ever again." Then, I detailed exactly what I'd contributed to their household over the past 4 years. Not just the $200,000 to pay off their mortgage, but everything else. The groceries I'd bought, the utilities I'd helped with, the repairs I'd paid for, the vacations I'd funded by lending them money that was never repaid. The total was staggering, even to me, $187,000. But the real gift was the final paragraph. "I consider this debt forgiven in exchange for 4 years of disrespect, ingratitude, and emotional abuse. We're even now. Don't bother calling. I'll be impossible to reach for the foreseeable future. P.S. There's bologna in the fridge for sandwiches. You remember how to make those, right? Ma'am, would you like a complimentary beverage?" The flight attendant's voice interrupted my daydream. "Champagne, please. I'm celebrating." Special occasion. I thought about Kristen discovering my letter, about 43 relatives arriving to an empty kitchen, about Robert having to explain to his family why Grandma wasn't there. You could say that. I just got my life back. The champagne was terrible airline champagne, but it tasted like victory. As we flew west toward the sun, I closed my eyes and imagined the chaos unfolding at home. Kristen frantically calling grocery stores, trying to find a caterer who could handle 43 people with 4 hours' notice. Robert realizing that his mother, reliable, predictable Margaret, had finally reached her breaking point. By now, they'd probably tried calling my cell phone, but I'd turned it off right after takeoff. Whatever emergency they thought this was, it wasn't my emergency anymore. For the first time in 4 years, someone else would have to figure it out. The Grand Wyla Resort was everything the website had promised and more. Palm trees swayed in the trade winds, the ocean stretched endlessly blue, and nobody knew me as anything other than Ms. Sullivan, a woman on vacation. "First time in Hawaii?" asked the cheerful desk clerk as she handed me my room keys. "First time doing anything just for myself in a very long time," I admitted. She smiled knowingly. "Well, you picked the perfect place for it. The spa is amazing, the restaurants are world-class, and if you want adventure, we can arrange everything from helicopter tours to swim with dolphins experiences." My suite was on the 7th floor with a balcony overlooking the ocean. As I unpacked my small suitcase, I tried to imagine what was happening 3,000 miles away. It would be late morning now in Chicago. The relatives would start arriving soon, expecting to find tables groaning under my homemade specialties. Instead, they'd find chaos. I should have felt guilty. The old Margaret would have been consumed with worry about disappointing people, about causing problems, about what everyone would think. But as I changed into the new swimsuit I'd hastily bought at the airport gift shop, I felt only satisfaction. They'd taken my generosity for granted for 4 years. They'd treated me like hired help, who should be grateful for room and board in exchange for endless labor. Well, now they could see what life was like without their personal servant. My phone had been buzzing incessantly since I'd turned it back on. 17 missed calls from Robert, 12 from Kristen, and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. I scrolled through them while sipping a Mai Tai on my balcony. Kristen: "Where are you?" Robert: "Mom, call me immediately. There's been a misunderstanding." Kristen: "This is not funny, Margaret. People are coming." Robert: "Mom, please, whatever's wrong, we can fix it." Kristen: "I can't believe you would do this to me. To us." The last message was from my granddaughter, Lucy. "Grandma, where are you? Mom is freaking out and Dad looks like he might cry. Are you okay?" That one tugged at my heart. Lucy was 17, old enough to understand that families could be complicated, but young enough to still worry about her grandmother's welfare. I typed back quickly, "I'm perfectly fine, sweetheart. Just taking a little vacation. Love you." Then I turned the phone off again. A waiter appeared at my elbow. "Another Mai Tai, ma'am?" "Why not? I'm celebrating my liberation." He laughed. "Divorce?" Something like that. As the afternoon sun warmed my face, I thought about the conversation that would be happening in my son's kitchen right now. Robert trying to salvage the family reunion. Kristen ranting about my selfish behavior. Relatives wondering where the food was. Let them figure it out. Let them call restaurants and grocery stores and try to piece together a meal for 43 people. Let them realize exactly how much work I'd been doing all these years while they took it for granted. Tomorrow, I'd start thinking about what came next. But today, I was just going to enjoy watching the waves and feeling the freedom of having absolutely no responsibilities except deciding whether to order room service or try one of the resort's restaurants. For the first time in 4 years, the only person I had to take care of was myself. I finally turned my phone back on Sunday morning, after 2 glorious days of spa treatments, room service, and blissful silence. The message count made me laugh out loud. 47 missed calls and 63 text messages. Most were from Robert and Kristen, but there were others too. My sister Dorothy from Wisconsin, confused about why she'd gotten a call asking if she knew where I was. Several neighbors wondering if I was all right. Even my old friend Beatrice from book club, who'd apparently been recruited in the search effort. But it was the voicemail from my grandson Tyler that finally made me call back. "Grandma, this is Tyler. I know you're probably mad at Mom, and honestly, I don't blame you. She made Dad call everyone in your address book looking for you. The whole family reunion was a disaster. They ended up ordering pizza. Uncle Mike said he's never seen anything so disorganized in his life. But seriously, are you okay? I'm worried about you." Sweet Tyler. At 15, he was becoming the kind of young man who noticed when someone was hurting. Unlike his parents, who'd been too busy taking advantage of my kindness to notice they were killing my spirit. I called Robert first. "Mom!" His voice was a mixture of relief and anger. "Where the hell are you? Do you have any idea what you've put us through?" "I'm exactly where I told you I'd be," I said calmly. "Impossible to reach for the foreseeable future." "This isn't funny, Mom. Kristen has been crying for 2 days. The family reunion was ruined. Aunt Susan asked me 15 times where you were, and I had to lie and say you were sick. Why did you lie? Because I didn't want to tell 43 relatives that my mother had apparently lost her mind. I sipped my coffee, real Kona coffee, not the generic brand Kristen bought to save money, and watched a pod of whales breach in the distance. Robert, did you read my letter? A pause. Mom, you were clearly upset about something. Did you read it? Another pause, longer this time. Yes. All of it? Including the part where I listed every cent I've contributed to your household over the past 4 years? Silence. Because I have to tell you, son, seeing it all written down was quite eye-opening. $187,000. That's not counting the unpaid labor, of course. Mom, we never asked you to keep track of... No, you never asked me to keep track because you never intended to pay me back. You saw me as a convenient ATM who also happened to cook and clean. That's not fair. You're family. Family helps each other. You're absolutely right, I said. Family does help each other, which is why I'm helping you learn to be independent. Consider it a gift. I could hear Kristen's voice in the background, shrill and demanding. Robert covered the phone, but I caught fragments. Tell her she has to come back. This is ridiculous. She's being selfish. When he came back on the line, his voice was strained. Mom, whatever this is about, we can work it out. Just come home. Home? I laughed, and it felt good. Robert, I don't have a home there. I have a room in your house where I'm expected to be grateful for the privilege of working myself to death for people who don't respect me. That's not. We do respect you. Your wife called me old-fashioned and cluttered. She redecorated my room without asking and threw away my pictures of your father. She talks about putting me in a senior community like I'm a burden she can't wait to dump. Another long silence. I didn't know she said those things. Of course you didn't. Because you stopped seeing me as a person a long time ago. I became furniture that occasionally cooked dinner. The truth of it hung between us, painful and undeniable. That afternoon, I was lounging by the pool when my phone rang again. This time it was Kristen, and for some reason, I decided to answer. Margaret, her voice was ice cold. I think we need to have a conversation about your little tantrum. Tantrum? I kept my voice pleasant. I prefer to think of it as a well-deserved vacation. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? What you've done to me? I took a sip of my pineapple smoothie. I imagine you had to actually work for a weekend. How novel. I had to order pizza for 43 people. My entire extended family thinks I'm incompetent because my mother-in-law abandoned us. I prefer the term resigned my position. This isn't a joke, Margaret. I called caterers, restaurants, even the grocery store deli. Nobody could help with 4 hours' notice. I was humiliated. Now you know how I've felt for 4 years. The line went quiet. Then Kristen's voice came back. Different now. Calculating. Fine. You want to play games? Let's play. You seem to forget that you don't own that house anymore. Margaret, we do. And if you don't come back and apologize for this ridiculous behavior, you might find yourself without a place to live. Something hot and dangerous flared in my chest. Are you threatening to evict me? I'm reminding you of reality. You sold your house, remember? You gave us all that money. You're dependent on us now, and dependent people don't get to throw tantrums. I stood up, suddenly too agitated to sit. Around the pool, other guests were enjoying their vacations, blissfully unaware that I was having the most important conversation of my recent life. Kristen, there's something you don't know about that money I gave you. What are you talking about? The $200,000 I used to pay off your mortgage? That wasn't from the sale of my house. Silence. That money came from a separate account, an inheritance Frank left me that I never told anyone about. The house sale money? That's sitting in investments, earning interest. I could practically hear her brain working, trying to understand what this meant. You see, Frank was a very careful man. He knew that large financial transactions within families could cause problems later, so he insisted everything be properly documented. Legal loan agreements, proper interest rates, everything above board. I don't understand. It means, dear Kristen, that I'm not dependent on you at all. In fact, it's quite the opposite. That mortgage-free house you're living in? I can call in that loan anytime I want. The silence stretched so long, I thought she'd hung up. You're lying. Am I? Check the paperwork. It's all there in black and white. A personal loan from Margaret Sullivan to Robert and Kristen Sullivan, secured by the property at 2847 Maple Street. I even charged you interest. Very reasonable interest, mind you. Frank would be proud of my business sense. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. What do you want? I looked out at the ocean, at the endless blue horizon that represented all the possibilities I'd forgotten existed. What I want is to finish my vacation in peace. What you want is to figure out how you're going to run your household without me, because Kristen, I'm not coming back. This time, I hung up first. The call from Robert came at 6 a.m. Tuesday morning, Hawaii time, which meant it was 11 a.m. in Chicago, and he'd clearly been stewing over my conversation with Kristen for the better part of 2 days. Mom, we need to talk. His voice was different, tired, defeated in a way I'd never heard before. Good morning to you too, son. Kristen told me about the loan paperwork, about the money. Is it true? I stretched in my luxurious hotel bed, watching the sunrise paint the ocean gold. Every word. Why didn't you tell me? Because you never asked where the money came from. You just took it and assumed I was giving it out of some maternal obligation to bankrupt myself for your benefit. A long pause. That's fair. Robert, your father spent the last year of his life making sure I'd be protected. He set up accounts, wrote legal documents, even recorded video messages explaining his wishes. He knew that grief makes people vulnerable, and he was determined that no one would take advantage of me. Not even his own son? The pain in his voice almost broke my resolve. Almost. Especially not his own son. Frank knew how charming you could be when you wanted something. Jesus, Mom! What kind of son does that make me? The kind who lost his way but still has time to find it again. I heard him take a shaky breath. Kristen's been saying things. About you. About the situation. I think I've been hearing what I wanted to hear, instead of what was actually happening. And what do you think was actually happening? I think we turned you into a servant in your own home. I think we took your money and your work and your love and gave you nothing back but a place to sleep. There it was. The truth, finally spoken out loud. Robert, for 4 years I've been waiting for you to see me. Really see me. Not as a convenient solution to your problems, but as your mother who deserved respect and kindness. I'm seeing you now, Mom, and I'm ashamed of what I see. Good. Shame means you still have a conscience. Are you ever coming home? I looked around my suite. At the fresh flowers the housekeeping staff brought daily, at the view that never got old. I don't know yet, but Robert, if I do, things will be very different. Whatever you want, whatever you need, we'll make it right. It's not about what I want from you anymore. It's about what you need to do for yourselves. You and Kristen need to figure out how to run your own lives without someone else doing the heavy lifting. After I hung up, I sat on my balcony for a long time, thinking about forgiveness and fresh starts, and whether some bridges could be rebuilt stronger than before. You look like a woman with a story, said the man at the neighboring table as I waited for my lunch at the resort's oceanfront restaurant. He was about my age, silver-haired with kind eyes and an easy smile, handsome in that weathered, outdoorsy way that suggested a life well lived. Don't we all? I replied, but I was smiling. Jim Nakamura, he said, extending his hand. Retired teacher from Oahu, and you're either on the world's most relaxing vacation or running away from something. Margaret Sullivan. And it's definitely both. He laughed. Mind if I join you? I hate eating alone, and you look like excellent company. Over lunch, I found myself telling him the whole story. Not just the recent drama, but everything. The 40 years of marriage to Frank, raising Robert, the slow erosion of my independence after Frank's death, the 4 years of indentured servitude, and finally, the great escape. Jim listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions and occasionally shaking his head in sympathy. So you're a fugitive from your own family, he said when I finished. More like a refugee. And what's the plan now? Besides enjoying paradise indefinitely? Honestly, I don't know. For the first time in my adult life, I get to figure out what I want instead of what everyone else needs from me. That's terrifying and wonderful at the same time. Exactly. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those intelligent eyes. Can I make a suggestion? Please, don't go back until you're sure you want to, not because you feel obligated to. You've earned the right to be selfish. That evening, Jim took me to a local restaurant his daughter had recommended. Not touristy, just good food, and the kind of atmosphere where locals gathered to talk story, as he called it. I moved here after my wife died, he explained over fresh ahi. Thought I'd stay 6 months, get my head straight, then go back to the mainland. That was 8 years ago. Do you regret it? Best decision I ever made. I discovered who I was when I wasn't trying to be who everyone else needed me to be. As we walked along the beach afterward, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not just attraction, though there was definitely that, but possibility. The possibility that my life wasn't over at 64, that there were still adventures to be had, connections to be made. Margaret, Jim said as we reached my hotel, I hope this doesn't sound too forward, but would you like to have dinner tomorrow? There's a sunset cruise I think you'd enjoy. I thought about the old Margaret, who would have found 17 reasons why it wasn't appropriate to date so soon after running away from home. I'd love that, I said. While I was falling in love with both Hawaii and a man named Jim, my former life was apparently imploding spectacularly. The full story came from Lucy, my granddaughter, who called Wednesday evening in tears. Grandma, everything's falling apart here. What's happening, sweetheart? Mom and Dad had this huge fight. I mean, huge. Dad found out some stuff about Mom that he didn't know before. I settled into my chair, sensing this was going to be a long conversation. What kind of stuff? Remember how Mom always said she couldn't work because someone needed to be home with us kids? Well, Tyler and I found out she's been working part-time at this boutique for 3 years and getting paid cash so Dad wouldn't know. Interesting. Why didn't your father know? Because she told him the money came from you. Like when she bought that expensive purse last month, she said you gave her money for it, but you were already gone by then, so Tyler and I knew she was lying. My blood went cold. Lucy, how much money did she tell your father came from me? I don't know exactly, but I heard them fighting about it. Dad said he thought Mom was being too hard on you because you were being so generous. He felt guilty that you were spending your savings on us. The scope of Kristen's manipulation was breathtaking. She'd been stealing from her own family while making my son believe I was voluntarily impoverishing myself for their benefit. There's more, Grandma. Dad hired someone to look into the house loan thing you talked about, and it turns out Mom knew about it the whole time. She had copies of all the paperwork hidden in her closet. Oh, Lucy. Dad moved out yesterday. He's staying at Uncle Mike's, and Mom keeps crying and saying it's all your fault, that you ruined everything by leaving. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my son's broken marriage, even though I knew I wasn't responsible for Kristen's choices. Sweetheart, I need you to listen to me carefully. None of this is your fault, or Tyler's fault, and it's not really my fault either. Your parents need to work out their problems themselves. But are you ever coming home? Dad keeps asking, and I think he really needs you right now. That tugged at my heart, but I thought about Jim, about the life I was building here, about the woman I was becoming. I don't know yet. Lucy, but no matter what happens between your parents, you and Tyler are always welcome to visit me here. In fact, I'd love that. Really? Even with everything that's happened. Especially because of everything that's happened. You're my grandchildren. That doesn't change just because the adults in your family have made a mess of things. After we hung up, I sat looking out at the ocean for a long time. Jim found me there an hour later, still processing the news. Penny, for your thoughts? My daughter-in-law has been systematically lying to my son for years, and their marriage just imploded. I should feel vindicated, but mostly I just feel sad. Sad for your son. Sad for all of them. Even her, in a way. She must have been pretty miserable to go to such lengths to deceive everyone. Jim sat beside me, taking my hand. You know what I think? What? I think you're exactly where you need to be. The call that changed everything came Thursday morning from a lawyer in Chicago whose name I didn't recognize. Mrs. Sullivan? This is David Chen from Walsh, Patterson and Associates. I represented your late husband Frank in some legal matters. I'm calling because recent events have triggered certain provisions in his estate planning. I sat up straighter. What kind of provisions? Mrs. Sullivan, your husband anticipated that you might face pressure from family members regarding financial matters after his death. He established what we call a protection protocol that activates under specific circumstances. I don't understand. One of those circumstances is if you're forced to live away from your primary residence for more than 30 consecutive days due to financial coercion or emotional abuse by family members. My heart started beating faster. And you've been in Hawaii for 8 days. If you choose to stay there for 22 more days, a trust worth $1.2 million will be released to you, along with a property Frank purchased in your name that you don't know about. I nearly dropped the phone. What property? A beachfront condo in Maui, fully paid for, held in trust with instructions that it'd only be revealed if you needed an escape route. Your husband was very thorough in protecting your interests, Mrs. Sullivan. The rooms seemed to spin around me. Frank had been planning for this scenario before he died. He'd known somehow that I might need saving from our own son. Mr. Chen, are you telling me that my husband bought me a house in Hawaii without telling me? He bought you freedom, Mrs. Sullivan. The house was just the delivery method. After the lawyer hung up, I sat staring at the ocean, trying to process what I'd learned. Frank had been more worried about my future than I'd realized. The business he'd sold in his final years had been more valuable than he'd let on, and he'd used those funds to create this safety net. The trust money was substantial enough that I'd never have to worry about finances again. The condo meant I could stay in Hawaii permanently if I chose to. But more than that, it meant Frank had loved me enough to plan for a future where I might need to choose myself over family obligation. My phone rang again. This time it was Robert. Mom, I need to tell you something about Kristen. I already know about the boutique job and the lying about money. There's more. His voice was heavy with pain. I found out she's been in contact with a lawyer about having you declared incompetent. She wanted to get power of attorney over your assets. The final piece clicked into place. Kristen hadn't just been using me as free labor. She'd been planning to take complete control of my life and finances. Robert, I need you to listen very carefully. I'm going to tell you something that will change how you see everything that's happened. I told him about the lawyer's call, about Frank's protection protocol, about the trust and the condo, about how his father had seen this exact scenario coming and had moved to protect me. When I finished, Robert was quiet for a long time. Dad knew, he finally said. Somehow he knew this would happen. Your father was a very wise man. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening. I'm sorry I let her treat you that way. I'm sorry I became the kind of man Dad felt he needed to protect you from. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I cried. 3 months later, I was standing on the lanai of my new condo in Maui, watching Jim tend to the garden he'd insisted on planting for me. The plumeria should bloom in spring, he called out, wiping his hands on his jeans. And the mango tree will give fruit in a few years. Planning to stick around that long? I teased. He straightened up, fixing me with that smile that still made my heart skip. Margaret Sullivan, I plan to stick around until you get tired of me. And maybe not even then. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. The decision to stay in Hawaii hadn't been difficult once I'd seen the condo Frank had chosen for me. It was perfect, small enough to be manageable, but with room for guests. The lanai overlooked the ocean, and there was a community garden where I'd already made several friends. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Lucy. Grandma, guess what? Dad bought me and Tyler tickets to visit you for spring break. That's wonderful. Sweetheart, I can't wait to show you around. And Grandma? Dad wanted me to tell you something. He and Mom are getting divorced, but it's going to be okay. He's happier now. We all are, actually. After we hung up, I reflected on how much had changed. Robert was indeed happier. He'd moved into a smaller apartment and was learning to cook for himself and the kids. He'd also started therapy, trying to understand how he'd lost his way so completely. Kristen had moved back to her parents' house and was working full-time for the first time in years. The divorce was proceeding amicably enough, though she'd tried one last time to contest Frank's trust, claiming I'd manipulated him. That lawsuit had lasted exactly 1 week before her lawyer advised her to drop it. The best part was that my relationship with my grandchildren had actually grown stronger. Without the toxic dynamic between their parents, we could simply love each other without all the underlying tension. You look happy, Jim observed, joining me on the lanai with 2 cups of coffee. I am happy. For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I want to be, with people who value me for who I am, not what I can do for them. Any regrets about the dramatic exit? I thought about that fateful Friday morning when I'd chosen freedom over servitude, when I'd finally said no to being taken for granted. None whatsoever. Sometimes you have to burn the bridge to find out you can fly. Jim raised his coffee cup in a toast. To flying, then. To flying, I agreed. As the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I thought about how many sunsets I'd missed during those 4 years of trying to be indispensable to people who didn't appreciate me. I'd wasted so much time trying to earn love that was my right to receive freely. But I wasn't wasted time anymore. At 64, I'd learned that it's never too late to choose yourself, never too late to demand respect, and never too late to start over. The best revenge, I'd discovered, wasn't making them suffer. It was making myself happy, and I was very, very happy indeed. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.